Back for more. Yes, graph science. Physics, mostly. So, there's more comments to get through. As I had previously stated, informing some people of what I've previously already stated, it was my intention to get to the Rooter comments first, and then some of the other comments might require some sort of conversation. And sorry for how long this all gets, but this is all sort of interesting. I mean, it's been kind of, it's already verified my initial, less detailed analysis that physics is really out of control. Yeah, just all this. When you start getting this dark energy, dark matter, the whole reason why they claim this to be absolute truth, that certain things are happening, expansions and all this kind of stuff, and you figure out why they're believing it, and you say, gee, once again, you've deduced something based on the thinnest possible evidence. It seems very much like what people of the past did with religion. They lacked information. They saw some simple correlation between rain and, I don't know, crop damage or some other thing, and thunder, and decided God was mad at them or something. Some of these conclusions are just drawn way too soon on way too little evidence, and then it just becomes a pursuit to validate this with any shreds, anything that even has the slightest hint of being a validation, and they go with it. And it's sort of easy to dissect this as being a problem in physics, that it just doesn't seem to have any mechanism to force rigorous testing, to say, okay, well, wait, let's test it with as many thought experiments, as many ideas as possible. And it seems they do that with as few as possible. So, let's just continue with snarky face over here. Personally, I don't like these media scientists neither. Well, in my opinion, you just really don't get how totally destructive they are to physics. They fulfill an important role, though, in breaking down complicated ivory tower ideas into simpler strands that can be understood by the general public. Well, I guess what I'm saying is I think they break it down into gobbledygook that just fools and deceives people into thinking they have hard evidence for things they don't have hard evidence for. And clearly, on the two-slit experiment, in my opinion, it's an overt fraud. I mean, even going to the point where no physicist even notices that the most popular videos on YouTube have elements in them, like we turned off the tape recorder and the two-slit experiment changed bullshit. The experiments that were never done. And, they don't even say anything. They don't do anything to correct that huge lie. In doing so, they sacrifice some scientific rigor. Well, I'm saying they're not being, I don't think they're being, well, let's let's be generous to the idiots and not explain all the little symbols in our equations. But I don't think conceptually they're being accurate. And so I think they're fucking the concepts, not just the technicalities, but the actual concept is being degraded and simplified. And part of that, I think, is just overtly a symptom of their own defensiveness, because this really is crazy, and they want to keep pretending it's fun being crazy, it's being scientific, crazy is good science kind of attitude. It's just, I think this is toxic to science. But I'd still say that they are able to communicate 80% of the content of modern scientific ideas by losing 20%. Well, it's not so much about how much is missing, it's about the deception that's in that 80%. That they didn't just subtract technical information, they've added misimpressions regarding not only what's been tested, like they keep saying quantum mechanics is the most tested theory in the history of mankind, when what they're arguing is that, yes, this relationship between photons and electrons has been thoroughly tested, but our interpretation of what's causing the relationship hasn't been thoroughly tested, of the stuff which is really hard to understand. So what they say is not the current understanding at the edge of the known scientific theories. I'm just saying that there's a lack of evidence. It's like Darwin's book was entirely a book about evidence. Darwin didn't add anything to evolution substantially, except for the idea of a natural selector. And even that, other people were going to write books about it. So it wasn't like it was a unique concept. And clearly the idea of evolution was already out there. His grandfather was an evolutionist. All Darwin was doing is saying, here's the evidence, more than just this impression that, when you see a Grand Canyon or something, you say, shit, the Earth must be an old place, or something that gives it away. You see a stalagmite and you realize this must have taken forever to form. And that you see these commonalities between all these organisms, and you say, gee, this is kind of weird. Why do they have this similar quality, these different organisms? Why do they carry the same tools and then carry other different tools? Well, I'm just saying, so you could have this impression that there seems to be some connection between these organisms and all that kind of stuff, and get this idea of evolution, but you really couldn't, you didn't have this itemized list of logical and rational reasons to draw the conclusion, not only that the Earth is really old, but that the stuff living on it changes routinely. And like the Galapagos would be like the perfect proof, in the sense that all you have to do is have a little bit of science, the science of realizing that the islands are different ages, and the obvious change with the different ages of the island regarding how mature the biosystem gets, and all of that kind of, and it's just so, it's so obvious that these are imported animals, and that they've changed their character based on isolation, and it's just such an obvious proof. But that's, I'm just saying, there's the evidence. The evidence is provided in the theory, and I'm just saying physics doesn't really do that. It doesn't show you the Galapagos Island. It just doesn't. But it's a pretty good picture of science at the end of the 20th century and beginning of the 20th. Well, you say it's a pretty good picture. I'm saying as I've pointed out, that they've gotten every major descriptor of reality wrong. Gravity's push, not pull. Photons have no character, almost zero character besides frequency and polarization, and it's completely the electrons that they interact with that are causing them to do something. They, on their own, as Feynman says, go from point A to point B in a straight line, and that we should understand that that straight line character has nothing to do with all this. All of a sudden they're doing all kinds of wacky shit. They're doing wacky shit because something wackier than them is telling them to. As a constructive critique, I encourage you to come up with experiments that could eventually falsify your theory. Well, I don't know about why I would falsify my own theory, but whatever. I don't even know what that means, but no, what I need is experiments that validate it and falsify the current nonsense. And I've suggested a lot of those, like aiming photons or electrons at the two-slit experiment and different things like that. And I think we could do a lot of things with satellites in terms of, I think if they put a satellite tangential to the Earth's orbit and shot one tangentially at a velocity that would be a perfect circle around the sun, that they would find that they can't find that velocity, that the radiation from the sun tangential to the Earth's orbit has no perfect velocity. And that would be an indication that the concept of gravity has a lot to do with spin, rotation, has a lot to do with a lot of elements that aren't going to exist by small objects, and they're not going to induce enough change in, say, the sun. Let's see how to put it. Yeah, I think the algorithm for this induction idea of gravity and the action-reaction part, I guess is what I'm saying, that the whole timing thing, that's the spin thing. The spin thing allows you to slow down something's spin, creating a force dynamic. A force has to be absorbed for you to slow down a spin. And at the same time, you can accelerate a spin and absorb the force in an opposite direction. So you can do either one of these things to a spin, and a spin is like a perfect regulator of those changes. So you can make changes in the speed of something and do an awful lot of work in the sense that you're you're turning on and turning off a force based on spin. But anyway, it gets a little complicated. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So look, it's a critique, but I'm just saying, obviously all this stuff, if it was simple to study, then I would simply study it. Okay, I'd provide simple experiments, but obviously this stuff's been around a long time, and if you could demonstrate stuff with simple experiments, then I guess it would have been demonstrated by now. I would guess I would argue that the single slit experiment does demonstrate a lot, and it certainly breaks all of this two-slit nonsense. There's clearly a diffraction, an interference pattern is being created with a single slit. So the idea of the number of slits being somehow relevant, I think, is obviously broken, and it's really about the number of surfaces. And then again, I've argued that I think if you do the experiment carefully with light and a single impediment, that you could extract the same interference pattern with just one surface. And I'm just saying that fact, I think, makes it obvious. And I'm just saying an aperture makes it obvious. I mean, the closing of an aperture creating rings, clearly it's only one surface in a sense. I mean, for each vector, for each part of that circle, if you just extract a section of the circle, it's clearly the pattern's there, and it's being caused by just one surface. Anyway, all right. Absolute Newtonian space. Let's see. Where was I? Falsified. I'd say what you are saying has been falsified over and over again. And yeah, you would say it, and I don't know how you fucking can say it. I think I falsified them. I've falsified Feynman's description of the two-slit experiment. I falsified Feynman's dismissal of kinetic gravity, particle gravity. Feynman's dismissal of it was idiotic in the sense that he used raindrops as an example of you running into a field of light photons. And I think we all understand that light is a constant, not raindrops, and that there's no way to make light more energetic in a sense. Not energetic, wrong way to say it. There's no way to change its velocity. It's always going to be standard. And so there's no, I don't know. I'm just saying that clearly a physicist would know it's very unlikely you're going to do anything constructive if you compare a photon to a raindrop. That those kind of comparisons, like the two-slit experiment of comparing photons to water waves, are not going to be constructive. So that no one in charge believes in absolute Newtonian space and absolute Newtonian time any longer. So you're saying that, again, you're just saying that because they all believe this, that somehow that's the way it is, and you're saying that the experimental evidence is so overwhelming and it's so incredible, and it's just, you can't possibly overcome their experimental proof of whatever, Copenhagen. I can overcome all of it, and I'm just saying that I can overcome it with, I think, are perfectly valid arguments. I've made the arguments regarding lensing. I'll do it probably again in one of these videos soon because somebody drew a picture of it, and I'm going to point out this idiotic picture. So, and what we should be able to do with the sun we currently have. The claim is Einstein was demonstrated to be correct, that you can lens using the sun. Well, the only obstacle to doing it routinely every day is the fact that we had atmospherically blind telescopes. Well, now we have a Hubble telescope. The biggest advantage of the Hubble telescope was the fact that it's not atmospherically blind. It can look anywhere at any place because it doesn't have to worry about scattering of light in the atmosphere. It doesn't have to worry about that pollution. And that was the only thing stopping Einstein's lensing from being seen in broad daylight any time. They had to wait for a frickin' eclipse only because they couldn't do what the Hubble telescope can do. So you don't think this is a valid argument to point out, well, why aren't they showing us lots of proofs of Einstein's lensing using our own frigging sun? Newtonian space and absolute Newtonian time any longer. Well, anyway, so again, you're just going to keep arguing that it's not a valid argument for you to point out that time and space can't hold energy. Okay, fine. I'm just saying I think that's a valid argument, that as soon as you put energy in these fake dimensions, these non-existent dimensions, that you're cheating. Just too many parameters would need to be violated by that idea. Well, it says your parameters of wave mechanics of the universe. The universe function on wave, and it doesn't function on periods. You know, frequency is not just a wave function. Frequency is a fact of bullets. It's a fact of solid objects. It's a fact of things vibrating. Things vibrating, not waves. Things moving. And their obsession with calling every movement some sort of wave dynamic is a crappy parameter. You also seem to hold some counterfactual ideas with respect to the two-slit experiment. I don't know what that means. I have bad ideas regarding the two-slit experiment. I'm somehow doing something against the facts. Name that. Name that thing. Name what fact I fucking violated in pointing out that there's single-slit diffraction. And explaining that the reason why two-slit diffraction is more intense is because the most intense light, the center light, is now being blocked by a slit. There's a surface right in the most intense light, and that's the difference, and the only fucking difference of meaning. How is that counterfactual? I mean, you say nothing in this. You just make these accusations that I have violated a fact, and yet you don't point out the fact I violated. It's just fucking goddamn lame. And then to end that insult with starting a sentence with dude, you patronizing motherfucking cunt. Alright, I'm not your goddamn dude, I'm not your goddamn boy, I'm not your goddamn inferior, motherfucker. Alright, and it's just a huge disrespect. You come on my video and use that kind of rhetoric. I mean, it's just so fucking insulting from a lame-ass motherfucker who has no icon, who puts nothing on the line. No credibility, no history, no anything. You just talk out of your motherfucking ass and you talk shit about me. That makes you a fucking weak cunt. Dude. Dude, we have done the two-slit experiment over and over again. Yeah, and what have you done? What have you done to analyze any of it in any kind of rational manner? Tell me, explain to me how you've done over and over again any kind of meaningful way except to cheat. Have you done over and over again where you said, look, here's the two-slit experiment. Here's the one-slit experiment right next to it. See the same pattern? Well, we say the two slits, the photon went through both slits and interfered with itself. Well, in the one slit, we're saying, no, the photon doesn't need to interfere with itself because it automatically makes more interference patterns because it interferes with itself without even a second slit being there. So the two part didn't really mean anything. You're saying that makes sense? You think that's how they've done it? Have they ever tried doing it with an aimed particle? An aimed electron? I don't know if you could aim electrons. That's the catch. I mean, electrons, as soon as you take them out of a magnetic field controlling where they're going, they tend to go almost anywhere. And what you claim has simply been demonstrated to be false. Name it, fucker. I mean, it's just so fucking lame. What have I claimed that they've demonstrated to be false? Name me one motherfucking real circumstance where you say they've demonstrated what I've said to be wrong, inaccurate, incorrect. Show me that, you stupid motherfucking lying cunt. Even when you are a theoretical physicist, you are bound by the experiment. Well, again, how are they bound by the experiment? I pointed out how they're basically lying about the two-slit experiment. I mean, it's an overt fucking goddamn lie. And you're telling me they're bound by the experiment? How are they bound by it? When they don't even mention single-slit diffraction in their lie. Oh, God. I mean, I shouldn't have read this comment because it's just such a waste of time. It's nothing but fucking gratuitously cheap shot and bullshit. You fucking weaselly wimp. You put nothing up. You put not one goddamn quote, not one goddamn statement, not one piece of evidence of some true experiment that has proven a motherfucking thing. Alright. Demonstrated to be false. Again, prove that, you fucker. Even when you are, otherwise you would be a mathematician. Well, again, your obsession with some sort of idea that mathematical models, mathematical abstractions of vector mechanics, you could say, or something. It's like the old days. There used to be something called vector images on the internet, and vector images were just mathematical compressions of image dynamics. By breaking everything into triangles and circles, you could describe triangles and circles with mathematics, and then just point out at what angle the two triangles were to each other, what size they were, and blah blah blah. And so you could reduce an image to to lines, and you could draw the lines more efficiently than you could draw the entire pixels of the bitmap. So instead of trying to know what each pixel was doing, you just had to know conceptually blah 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 blah. And so yeah, you lost some detail, but you gained, and that's really very much what mathematics, all it's doing. It's taking something in the real world that has many zillions of permutations, lots of character, and it's reducing it to its simplest parts and its basic idea. So it's taking a complex curve, you know, and breaking it down to a simpler curve. I mean, that's the nature of fucking calculus, for fuck's sake. But let's not make it into magic. It's not magic. It's just a compression algorithm. And if possible, it's better to use the real bitmap than to use the mathematical representation. Look into the works of, no, fuck you. He's an objectivist who criticizes, I don't care what he does, Kantian ideas in modern physics and wants to replace them with a system of objective time and space. Well, fine, it's, whatever. I don't know why I don't know why I would bother combining objectivism and Kantianism into physics. So I don't even know why that would be terribly relevant. And it sounds like another fanatic doing something for a fanatical reason. I'm an objectivist because I think that's what all the evidence points to. Shithead. An absolutist. A realist. Yeah. A non-ghostist. Alright. So now we'll do some of these other better comments. Now I wanted to get to the red shift subject because that one's really alright, so that Krauss guy, you can get his book. You know, he has an audio version where he's reading it. He's reading it. A little bit of ego again. But anyway, and you know, I'm through the first two chapters maybe. Boring as fuck. And you know, he's you know, when you find out what the big bang of his book is, you know, this big something from nothing, and he doesn't offer anything in terms of a something from nothing, because his nothing is a bunch of fucking dark matter and dark energy, and all that stuff is still nothing. You know, the fabric of space, this nothing is full of something, and so it's like, oh yeah, so it's something from something. Oh, I get it, yeah. Catch-22, right? I mean, you shouldn't sell ideas like that. It's like me titling a book, The Cure for Cancer, and then the book basically ends by saying, ain't here yet. You know, I mean, fuck, this is so lame. But anyway, the whole redshift thing, you know, is they've built so much of this expanding universe on the fact that there was redshift, and that it's graduated redshift. The further away something is, the redder it is. And they all think that redshift is caused by space. You know, that somehow the only way you can make redshift is somehow the distance has to expand. You have to stretch the wave, because they're not really getting it, that it's a bunch of particles being dumped out of the trunk of something. And one of the key ingredients here is that things can give off light sideways. You know, I can be a train moving the speed of light, and I can have a flashlight shooting out the side. You know, I could be a train just going 60 miles an hour, and I can have a flashlight sticking out the side. So the light beam won't be in any real way affected by my my recession, or my procession, my moving towards you or away from you. Won't be affecting the wave in any way. And so I guess it's like with sound. You know, the sound can go past you, and it'll have the same effect, because, you know, sound does the wave thing. And so it's not a good comparison. This light's not a wave. So this might be one way to understand how light's not a wave, is that light won't do what sound does. And anyway, so so they've used this redshift thing as a fundamental element of this argument that space is expanding. And they use the word expansion as if they were talking about its velocity is moving it away from us, when it's not its velocity. They're saying it's space expanding. So things aren't really moving away from us, that space is creating more space between us. And part of the argument I've made in the past is that velocity, the time changing thing, the metabolism changing thing, is a real event. And things moving fast are going to have a metabolism change. So if you're moving really fast, when you shine a flashlight forward, something's going to happen. When you shine it backwards, something's going to happen. But when you shine it sideways, something's also going to happen, because it's your whole metabolism that has changed. So no matter which way you point your flashlight, like the clock you're carrying, isn't working right. It doesn't tell the right time anymore. That's just the truth. Space outside of your velocity, something not going as fast as you, is telling the right time. You're telling the wrong time. We're all telling a wrong time. The only thing telling the right time is something not moving. That's it. It's metabolism. And so all the light you're going to create is likely to be redshifted if you have any velocity relative to anything else. So I'm just saying that in a sense, it's a register of absolute velocity. You won't have any redshift if you're not redshifted, and so if you're not moving. So the flashlight changes just like the clock changes. So when I produce light going sideways, say I'm going half the speed of light or a quarter of the speed of light, and I shine light out sideways, the light I'm producing, because my metabolism has changed, is still going to be redshifted. So even though I'm not moving towards you or away from you, so even though I'm not moving away from you, just because I have velocity, the light you see is going to be redshifted. So in theory, there'd be lots of things that have velocity that isn't away from us in the universe. There'd be lots of things moving sideways, tangentially to us. Not parallel, but tangential. And those things will all look redshifted if they have velocity. But it'd be wrong to conclude it has redshifted because its space is expanded and it's moving away from us. That's the wrong conclusion. The right conclusion is that things moving fast will produce redshifted light. So yes, things furthest away from us in the universe would likely have the highest velocities because those things were on the outside of the explosion. So again, back to the explosion argument, the things on the outside of the explosion are likely to be moving the fastest because they're the furthest from the explosion point and all that kind of crap, so they had to be moving faster. And the less slower moving things will fill in the rest of the space. So it makes perfect sense that everything would look redshifted. And again, I said, from our perspective, especially looking back at things moving slower than us, those things certainly would look redshifted only because we're moving faster away from them. So there's two places you can get redshift from. One, whether you are moving towards or away, but clearly you can also go get redshift just because your metabolism is slower and you're producing duller, slower frequency light. So that's why everything appears to be redshifted and so few things are blue shifted. Alright, I don't want to go into blue shift because that's another complex explanation, but so I'm just saying here's good reason, rational evidence, that there's no reason to conclude space is getting bigger. There's every reason to understand that movement creates redshift, and it doesn't matter which direction the movement is, it's going to redshift the light you produce. And it's only when you're coming directly at something does your velocity towards them overwhelm the metabolism change that took place. So as you move towards something, even though you're dropping things slower, you're moving towards them fast enough where the drop rate increases because of your moving forward. Eating space as you drop. And remember, what you're dropping is something moving the speed of light. You're dropping it into like a zero space, and so that's why the constant of speed is always the same. You can't push it faster. You can only change how much distance there is between the things you're dropping. All right. This is really important stuff, and it's just, this is a conversation physicists should have had, and they just dismissed everything. All right, anyway. So, Steen Pedersen, is doing whatever. There are videos. Well, I'll play with. I mean, just a little bit annoying. I mean, there are a ton of videos, and look, you don't want to watch them. You don't want to watch them. I can't help you, buddy. But this idea I'm supposed to personally instruct you. Okay, on the website that's linked in the description of every one of these videos, there has a video right there at the beginning that goes from the beginning to the end. Now, I made it a while ago, and it's not perfect, but it's still pretty good at explaining basically what I'm talking about. So, and it has the whole X thing in it. I mean, the X thing is what explains all of this, so I don't really want to do this over and over again. All right, anyway, some vital questions here, to you. There's no forces, only mechanics, you say. Again, I don't know how you could say that. I'm talking about a field, and I'm saying, to say there's no forces, I'm telling you the force is made of something. So if you think forces are some sort of invisible, non-material thing that takes place, I'm saying yes. No, forces are material. Forces are real things. Force is a real dynamic. It's not some magical thing where it just moves to the other thing because of nothing. It's something that's pushing it. So yes, I'm saying all forces push. Everything, nothing goes somewhere else because nothing hit it. No, something hit it and it goes somewhere else. Okay, so how would the one mechanical entity be able to push another mechanical entity? Well, again, if you understand anything I've been talking about things crashing into each other. The entire universe is made out of BBs. Some of the BBs are caught in orbits. Those we call matter. So the BBs caught in orbits are matter. The BBs free are not matter. The field BBs are essentially become gravity. They're all moving all the time at the speed of light. It's a zillion photons that you can't see because they have no frequency. So there's a zillion, gazillion, bazillion photons flying around you all the time that are completely invisible. 1,000,000 times more than any amount of light that could shine on you. There's 1,000,000 times more of these other BBs that are exactly the same as the photons, except you can't see them. They don't interact with you in the same manner. Your electrons don't absorb them or be impacted by them. But what does happen is when they go through you, they by a percentage affect or exchange directional information. So if there's more of the BBs on one side of you than there are on the other side of you, you will be pushed essentially by them in the sense that your BBs will exchange directional information and a predominance of your structure will tend to move in the direction of the force. Yes, all mechanical. If there are no forces, push with what? Well, again, push is, I said with what? It's all a kinetic field. There's more energy in empty space, probably nowhere close to their numbers. Like they say 5% matter and 95% dark energy and dark matter. What I'm talking about is something like a 10,000% versus 0.00001% being matter, that kind of difference. And touch with what? Again, it's all made out of quanta, individual little BBs. The whole thing is just little BBs with a direction that move the speed of light. And if you think about that at all, you'll understand that in a field of little BBs all moving a different direction at the speed of light, that everything would be under intense pressure from, they'd be constantly getting hit with BBs, constantly. And the only thing that makes a difference is imbalance. So as long as the same number of BBs hit me from this side as hit me from that side, I don't notice anything because they don't do anything. They don't harm me in any way. All they can do is give me velocity. And they'll give it to me without any heat, without any harassment at all. They'll just change what my matter's doing, and I will move in the direction of that imbalance in the force. It just carries me like like a piece of paper on a, like a leaf on a stream. I'll just get carried with the force. Jeez. You state that all matter is photons moving at the speed of light, but trapped in circular movement. Now, okay, you got that one right. Invisible photons. That keeps things basically building blocks. What keeps these basic building blocks in circular movements, if not a force? Again, it's the external pressure, the fact that each tiny bit of space, if all of these pixels were little bits of energy moving in a different direction, you could understand that if I pick any pixel, any place, there would be a ton of the little things that would go right for it. A ton of them would be going all over the place, doesn't even come near me. But from every single pixel perspective, it would look like, from that perspective, that all of these things were just coming right at it. He would just be saying, look at all these jackasses coming right for me. Everything that comes towards you would look like it's personal, like it's pointing right at you. Even though no one's really shooting at you, you're going to feel like you're surrounded by a bunch of guns and they're shooting at you, in a sense. So that's the force. Obviously, that's pushing everything together, and it's holding atoms together, and it's holding electrons together, and it's holding all of that stuff together because of polarization, which can magnify gravity. So it magnifies, doubles gravity's strength. But we don't need to even get into that. Just the conceptual idea that that fundamental pressure is what creates the shadowing effect, which is just so fundamental as a concept. Just this idea of understanding that if I have a field of arrows going in all directions, all right, you can understand that that's pressure, because every space would have this pressure. And you can understand that an object with mass is absorbing the pressure. So the arrows going this way, some percentage of them get blocked by the gravitational body. That means they don't get to me on this side. So that means I have more arrows coming this way at me than arrows coming this way at me, and I move towards the object. I mean, that shadow effect is exactly what's happening, and it happens exactly by the inverse square rule, because it's a shadow. Because the pressure can't get equalized, because light doesn't go around corners. I mean, not on its own. It can't just fill a void. It has to be diffracted into a void. And clearly, your shadows right now don't have a perfect edge to them. And because of the fact that, yes, there is some diffraction on the surface of materials, and that diffraction has the effect of creating that quantum effect. It creates this field effect. The fields around us end up creating particles around us, and those particles interact with the photons and bend them. But it's a tiny, tiny fraction of the shadow. All right, so I think that's enough. I mean, this really isn't. Like I said, if you understand it at all, like I said, that you have this massive field of randomness, and if you think about it, the massive field of randomness is always going to look like, from any one point, there's going to be a ton of arrows that will hit this point, that will go through this point. So there's a bunch of arrows going all kinds of directions, and all of the ones not hitting me become totally irrelevant in a sense. And if I just count the ones that are going to hit me, it looks like a perfect sphere. I mean, it all comes from all directions and they hit me. And that happens at every point in space. It's a perfectly balanced pressure made out of a completely, perfectly randomized field of directional information. And then once you create something that's smushed together, once you force two things together, you create an imbalance in the field, and forever that imbalance is going to keep creating more imbalance. Imbalance breeds imbalance. And that's the nature of the evolution of matter. All right, enough. All right, superior mind guy. Well, I don't know if there's going to be, I mean, we're going to agree on a lot of this stuff, so, but I guess it's worth bringing up. And some of these people made reasonable arguments, and I don't know if it's worth me highlighting them again, because people might have read them already. All right, yeah, molecular biology's completely complex fundamentals and implications of medical science make it a subject where ideally we really shouldn't want interpretive mistakes, or voodoo, or I mean, the classic example in medicine would be the crackpot doctor, or the guy just making money. You know what I mean? The whatever you call those, snake oil. And if real medicine decided to make snake oilers part of their community, that's dangerous. And it's sort of getting like that a little bit. You see some of that in medicine now. You see a lot of things where, gee, you're wondering why the establishment doesn't take care of that nonsense. So, the corruption does seem to be everywhere. I guess I would argue that physics doesn't have these obvious financial incentives, but clearly, too, it's looking like there's some of that, too. The NASA making the overly aggressive announcements about we found this, or we turned yogurt into a cyborg or a zombie, or we did this, or they all seem to be running for some sort of news headline, so they can get more, institutional money. They get more endowments because they're doing interesting thing in the paper. And so then rich people, when they die, will say, well, let's give the money to them. They're finding aliens. There's still so much we don't actually know. We're discovering new things every day. I was thinking like that too. It's like saying the changes of relationship are caused by the change of relationship. Changes of relationship, yeah. Makes more sense that the change has cause. Pulls are non-causal. Yeah, well, pulls are just, again, pulls, there's no way to imagine pulls without imagining a contact, an intimacy, a connection. And that's the bogusness. It requires some pre-existing condition that has connection. And that's not intuitive to this idea of something that doesn't doesn't manufacture God. It has to be a system that doesn't have any built-in catches like that. A functionalist mean quanta-directed exchange mechanism makes perfect sense. So he's basically just saying a bunch of random energy, pressure, that has balance, and balance will be invisible. Makes sense. Sort of agree. Well, anyway, space-time effects. Simply as an artifact of Planck's size, limited quanta rate, which affects how many units the constituents must move per revolution. Yeah, well, this gets kind of complicated. The Planck time, Planck space thing. I just mean that I haven't. It may not be complicated. It gets into a morass of what I have in thinking about time, and it's what's causing it. You can imagine, that it has some rules that are expressed in the end, and in terms of light speed in a vacuum or something. But I might, in future, I have made some indication that I think time might be a consequence of some part of what light does, and that in other circumstances the speed would be infinite. But it would never be in a circumstance where it could ever express infinite, because there'd be no medium that could ever be free of the element that causes time. So what I'm saying is it could be that the interactions that are bounces off sideways could be time-free, in that they happen with infinite speed, like they didn't happen at all. And it's only the interactions that are direct, where things bounce off of each other, and reverse direction, that take time. And so that could create a mechanism where you could understand that some events could happen zillions of times in the amount of time it took one interaction to take place. So you could have a zillion certain kind of interactions in the same amount of time that it would take to have the one interaction, and that can give you an indication of a lot of force movement. Force could move through things at different speeds. I don't know if that's the way I want to say it, but anyway, it's not critically important. Changing really, that makes no sense. A frictionless mean quanta directive exchange mechanism. Okay, so the main thing, frictionless, is a really important word here. Space-time, simply an artifact of Planck size, okay, which affects how many units, okay, that we do that. I was also thinking, when traveling through these slits, there will be interaction with the constituent fields. That's what I'm talking about. I'm saying that's what's causing the thing. The fields have field lines, like in a magnet, actually do collect ions and electrons. Anything that has a charge will be pushed into those field lines, quote unquote. They'll fall into them, and because they're completely neutral points where there's no pressure one way or the other, they'll stay there. So unless they have a velocity sufficient to push them right through the field line, they'll stop at the field line, because the field line basically is a place where there's, hey, nothing's motivating me, so I can stay here. Anyway, which I expect wave effects to emerge. So yes, exactly. So the field lines set up an arrangement of electrons in different positions, and the different positions of the electrons dictate a different refraction angle. And that difference in refraction angle creates a different place where the light will inevitably end up. This is why you can stack the emission quality. I don't know about that, what that means. Quantity. Oh, and like stacking waves mathematically, it produces the same result. Quantity, emission quantity. Well, the point is that they'll be in a range of deflection, and if you keep changing, each deflection will be off by a certain amount, and so each one will do 10% of the pattern or something. You know, I don't know. It gets a little complicated, because I think that the end is where it matters anyway, and that's where the field line curves. So I think it's the curvature of the field line is where the diffraction is really taking place, but that's a whole other issue. And let's see, the amplitude is really the quantity of emissions. The amplitude, obviously. Light, the intensity of light is clearly just the amount of quanta you can fit. So the closer the quanta are together, obviously in the same second of time, you can produce a ton more energy. So, you know, whatever the timing cycle is. So obviously light is so fast that you have to think in terms of milliseconds rather than seconds, but I'm just saying that you could have 1 millisecond, you know, at high frequency light, many more quanta get by than lower frequency light. There's a lot fewer, and that's really what amplitude is just the number of the little bangy things. This is why you can stack the. We already did it. Doesn't mean that themselves. It doesn't mean they are themselves waves. Right? They're just things coming at a period. Things coming at a period. All things doing something that has a period are not waves. So again, that's how bogus physics has become. Is it sort of is implying that anything that has a frequency is somehow a wave. Just direction and frequency. Right? It doesn't break the math to see it that way. I would suspect, well, obviously it doesn't break the math because we're putting the same, we have my theory and their wave theory has exactly the same variables that go into the equation. It's the period, the speed of light, the distance of the surfaces, meaning how much light's going to hit the surface, you know, what percentage of the light will go against the surface. That's what the distance in the thing depends on, and then the distance of the aperture to the target. I mean, these are all the same exact variables. There's no variable that's different when you think of light as a particle, or if you think of light as a wave. You're not changing any constituent part of the light. So it's exactly the same variables. But it's completely a different thing depending on how you think about it. Whether you do call them waves or particles makes a huge difference in terms of seeing it. But obviously the mathematics would be identical, because you're just still talking about a period between things. And I'm just saying the things are a thing, and they're saying the thing isn't a thing. The period is the thing. They're saying the thing in between the things is the thing, and I'm saying no, the thing has endpoints and beginning points. And the endpoint and beginning points aren't really endpoints and beginning points, they're individual quanta. They're the thing. Well, anyway, I think you understood what I just said. I would suspect the momentum of the slit body to be altered very minutely by light which passes through them, which would be evidenced that it is truly interaction with constituents. The evidence of your concept of momentum, which makes perfect sense. Well, I don't know exactly what that means. But there's still the idea that the light that hits the surface is, but the light that doesn't pass through the two slits is also creating energy in the slit material and may in fact be amplifying the field energy, which in turn makes it more possible to create diffraction. So it would be an interesting experiment if we could aim the particles to see if, when you don't have any spillover onto the surface of the material, whether the effect is as intense. Because I might speculate that the intensity of the effect, not proportionally, I mean it wouldn't change how much light is percentage-wise, how relatively intense the different bars of light are, but it would change the overall intensity of the pattern itself. How much yeah, it might change how many bars you'd. It'd be interesting. I have to figure out how that variable would change. Yeah, it would just change. It would mean that the central maxima wouldn't be as bright by relative to the rest of the bar pattern. Yeah, that's it. And you sort of can see that with laser light again. I know it's probably just because of the fact that the laser light doesn't have a, it doesn't come at a peak intensity in the center and then less intensity at the fringes. But it might also be that when the laser light hits the edges of the slit, that where it's absorbed by the material, that more intense light is being absorbed by the material, and it might be intensifying the effect of the field. But that's getting really into minutia. All right. Okay, so this superior-minded guy, so he sort of is just mocking the idea of putting the whole universe into half the size of a proton, and it's just saying, yeah, that does sound really stupid. Numbly Numb shows up. I think he makes generally not terrible comments. I guess I'll just point out, he makes some comment about how, well, why did you just read the comments that suck, or something, It's like I pointed out why I was doing this in a certain order. But anyway, the idea of the possibility of a singularity presupposes Einstein's curved space-time. Exactly. So the argument, again, that Einstein's space-time is really dependent on how you have to sort of built in an understanding that if really the mechanism is a push force, the push force would have a maximum limit. So there would be a rule where it doesn't matter how much heavier you make the thing, you cannot pull the space down any straighter. You're at the maximum speed. So even if something gained more size or mass, it couldn't possibly create more gravity. So that might be a fact of gravity, is that it has a speed limit, so to speak, a force limit. And once you're past that, you can't create any more gravity. You can't create any more intensity to the acceleration. And his math doesn't have that limit. So preposterous things are made possible in terms of creating infinite gravity in small volume. In general relativity, a singularity is described as a point of infinite curvature of space-time itself. So again, this is just the idea that you can just keep piling mass in, and you just keep straightening the walls of the curvature, and there's really no point. Once you have a straight line fall, he's saying you can fall faster and faster and faster, and you really can't. The speed of light is the speed of light. So it's more that the space itself changes to allow matter or energy to fit. Well, I think it's fitting only because they're allowing matter to go faster than the speed of light, and therefore they're creating matter that essentially has molecular bits that are moving 1,000,000 times faster than the speed of light. So they're not using the constraints that matter can't contain bits moving faster than the speed of light. So they're putting a ton of energy into material objects by merely saying that electron is spinning 1,000,000,000 miles an hour, when that can't happen in reality. See, the point is that they're not really recognizing E equals mc squared, so they're not recognizing that energy is in matter, and you can't put more energy into matter than the energy of the speed of light. You have to recognize that the quanta in the matter can't essentially have more energy because you made them go faster than the speed of light. So you broke the rules of energy to matter conversion. You're taking super energy of some kind and putting it in matter by souping up the idea that you can have a proton with 1,000,000,000 suns worth of movement inside of it. You can't do that. It's as if a piece of space-time was cut out of the universe. It's the same problem with black holes. Well, the problem is as I've stated, is that they have math that really isn't finished, and they're just not recognizing. They don't understand the force at all. They're using gravity to explain gravity, and so they're not recognizing, they're not being able to detect that gravity could have clear, definite limits to how much force it can create, how much energy can be generated. And they're just pretending none of that exists, that you could make mega monster planet, and in the first place, without the center being destroyed, in the sense that I would argue, quite obviously, that there's a point where you get so much shadowing that the material in the center of some solid, huge object would not have sufficient gravity. It wouldn't be getting enough external force to maintain its existence. It would just fall apart. The orbit couldn't be maintained because there's no external pressure, because the matter is blocking all of the photons of gravity. The external field can't get to the center. It's all blocked, and if it's all blocked, the atoms fall apart. So any reality like that clearly wouldn't be described by Einstein's math. The definition of the black holes of a singularity or black hole exists strictly within the terminology introduced by general relativity and can't really be defined outside of it. Clearly it can be defined by anything outside of it. Create convergence that's magical, so they can create some other kind of magical source of convergence. And again, it just depends on, if you're just pretending that the speed of the stream can be infinite, well, yeah, you can make the same mistake. But what's clearly being argued is the speed of the stream isn't infinite. A school of fish can't move faster than the speed of light, kind of thing. You can't make the matter move that way. Even when you convert it into raw energy, you can't make it go super light speeds. General relativity and all of its derivative predictions are obvious ad hoc bullshit. Yeah, that's sort of ad hominem, but okay, fine. Exactly what that's how I would say it. Yes, that's what it is. Bullshit. So basically they're saying Planck lengths change and constant of speed of light. How do they know this? Well, they're not paying any attention to the constant of the speed of light, as I'm arguing. They're basically built into their math this idea that they can create an electron that has 5,000,000 times the speed of light built into its spin or something, and they're hiding 1,000,000,000 tons of energy in this false idea of matter that can hold more supersonic photons than you can have. You can't have one. You can't make an atomic bit that's moving faster than the speed of light, and they make zillions of them, so obviously they can keep them in a tiny amount of space because they've put a ton of energy in that they've broken the speed of light to put them in there. I don't think they do know this. There's no direct evidence that it works like that. I think it's bunk. I don't know exactly how he's arguing with him. They don't claim that the speed of light changes. Yes, they do. I'm saying they claim they have particles moving faster than the speed of light. They have elements of matter moving faster than the speed of light. That's how they put more energy in the matter. They say the reason is black holes are black is that the curvature of space-time causes an acceleration, exactly, that should theoretically exceed the speed of light. That's what I'm saying, exactly. So they're making things move faster than the speed of light to be able to put them into, I mean, you can make them, I'm just saying it, you can make a smaller volume do more energy and therefore be less matter. You can hold more matter with more energy